Hello, and welcome to the Weekly Reid. I'm Sean Reid, and I'm a filmmaker. First, thanks to Jay Horton for the encouragement and the use of his channel. To the independent filmmakers with visions of making your first feature, I've been there, and I've helped other filmmakers make theirs. The challenge is always going to be resources, and the audience is never going to care. To the working pro that wants to make the vanity indie project, everything still applies, but I guarantee it's twice as much, if not 4 times as much work, and the willingness to go beyond the bounds of what you think can be done and what will be done, and that will make the difference. Today's guest is filmmaker Jay Horton, and as most of you know, this is his channel. But first, interviewing Jay today and the very unfortunate situation that occurred on the Alec Baldwin set that led to the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins had me thinking about sets and all the sets and production offices I've worked on and the people that I've worked with over my career. So many times you spend more time with the people on a particular set or project than you will with your family or friends. And then a process, at least for a time, they become your production family. Some of us spend enough time that they become your production wife or husband. I've had more of those than successful relationships. I can't imagine the pain and grief that is on the set, and I'm sure all the parties involved are devastated. They have lost a family member. Rest in peace, Helena Hutchins. And now, filmmaker, director, editor, writer, entrepreneur, Bigfoot expert, holistic medicine explorer, exercise bike rider, production company owner, distributor, and my friend, Jay Horton. Jay Horton, what's up, man?
Hey, Sean, glad to see you. I really appreciate the exercise bike rider and the Bigfoot expert.
Well, absolutely. I mean, they all apply. There are more, I'm sure, that we could throw in there, but it was what it is. So, first off, thank you so much, and let's get to this because I'm sure that folks have a lot of questions they'd like to throw in. But I've got a lot of questions I'm getting to ask you on your own channel. So now you've taken the veil down, and you're going to reveal even more secrets than ever before, or at least that's what you promised.
Right.
So, so first off, so where did you grow up? I know, but do they?
Yeah. I grew up in Indiana, a town called Fort Wayne. It's about 2 hours north of Indianapolis, which is the capital. It's about 3 hours south of Chicago. It's a decent sized town. It sounds small, but it's like the population's in the millions, I think.
It's in the millions, he thinks. Got
Last
it.
I checked.
Last you checked. So, I mean, if you were going to describe your growing up as a movie, what would that be?
Oh man, it'd be a really boring ass movie. It would be me sitting in front of the TV watching movies. No, that's not true. I mean, when I was a kid, I got out there and I played with others. We did all our games and hide and seek and tag and played superheroes and all that crap. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, movies were always a huge part of my life. So I was sitting at home watching movies. Very, very, very kind of boring.
So, watching movies really is probably how you got inspired to get into movies. Is that what made you explore getting a career into the filmmaking?
Yeah, I always wanted to so I always loved it. But being in, the Midwest and Indiana, I didn't really see any real way into the industry. There
Hmm.
weren't a lot of industry professionals in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Some videographers, doing lawyer commercials and stuff like that. But for the most part, it just didn't seem feasible. So I was a fan.
Hmm.
And I fell in love with performing kind of early on. I was, I sang in school. I was in a couple of rock bands, and honestly, that's what I thought my path was going to be. I thought I was going to be a rock star. So, I did the rock band thing for a couple of years. And during that time though, like I was shooting like our little music videos and I was making, shorts and stuff like that, but I still didn't really see any, route into doing film professionally. When the band thing fell apart in my like I think early 20s, I was like
Hmm.
22. I had, hadn't went to college yet, so I decided to go to school. And I went down to the University of New Orleans and went to college. I was a communications major, and they had a pretty good film program. And it was there that I started to see that, oh wait, like you don't necessarily have to be like a big director, like you can learn the skills and you can work in the industry while you're still working towards that goal. So that's kind of where it crystallized for me, I think.
Hmm. So, what was the important lesson that you took from film school?
Honestly, I guess the importance of collaboration. And this is going to sound really hokey, but for me, the biggest thing about college was learning how to think, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. Like learning how to solve problems, learning how to learn new things, because for the first time in my life, I was a horrible high school student. So in college, it just clicked for me. Like I was a really good college student. My GPA was like 3.5 or something like that, and I had just, I mean, I've basically flunked out of high school, but learning how to like tackle a foreign language, like studying Spanish, you had to learn how to study in a new way, learning about politics and learning how to study in a new way. And I think that all lent itself to how I attack filmmaking and learning and problem solving.
So, and would you say that in some levels that that's how you approach that you do approach filmmaking ultimately from that way? It's like from a logical approach of like reverse engineering and problem solving, in a sense of breaking it down. How does that apply to you in your process
Yeah.
today?
So I would say that's a pretty fair assessment of my process today.
Hmm.
I'm a much more pragmatic. I approach filmmaking much more pragmatically than I did in my youth.
Hmm.
When I was in college and I was still, kind of learning, learning the basics, but I still had that, like I want to be a rock star. I want to be a famous director, like that. On it, to be 100% honest, that was probably my number one goal. It wasn't even so much about the self-expression. Like I really had that I want to be a rock star mentality. Over the years, that has diminished and it's become much more about the work. And then on a pragmatic level, how to continue to do that work and be able to be paid for it and, earn a living.
Well, and that makes sense. I mean, it's a if you want to continue to do it, you have to find avenues to do that and to be able to finance it in some way. And some of that for you was going as a professional working for hire in certain kinds of ways. So how did you get from film school to I know that you'd worked at Fox at some point. So
Yeah.
where does that go from? And in a path of out of film school kind of with a rock star mentality going into becoming an editor, which is not necessarily the most rock star of the positions. I mean, DPs are probably more rock starish in some level than editors. So where how did that happen?
So, well, initially, I kind of bypassed the traditional system to start. I just graduated college. The Panasonic DVX 100 had just come out,
Hmm.
or 100A, I can't remember. The first 24p mini DV camera. So it was like kind of possible to shoot filmic looking stuff
Mm.
in digital. So I convinced an employer that I was working for part time to invest a little bit of money. I got together a couple of friends that were in college with me, and we just decided that, hey, we're going to make a movie. We're just going to make a feature film. And to be perfectly honest, looking back, we really didn't have much much business making a feature film at that point, but we did.
Hmm.
The budget was around, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000. We shot it in 5 or 6 days. We found a self-storage facility. It was like, it's this, man, I wish this location was still available. It was a 5-story self-storage facility that used to be a luxury hotel, and they had converted it. So the top like 5 or 6 floors were just like straight, looked like a spooky self-storage facility. But as you
Hmm.
start getting into the lower floors where they hadn't completely remodeled, it had the remnants of an old luxury hotel. So you had like these giant ballrooms and, winding staircases, and it all looked dilapidated. It was neat. But anyway, so we did that completely on our own. None of us were really writers at that point, and me and two friends, we pretty much just threw together a script. I think it was like 50 pages. Our logic at the time, which I hear this logic all the time with horror filmmakers, they say, well, my script doesn't need to be 90 pages because horror is all about suspense and it's going to stretch out. It doesn't, guys. Like, on average, I don't care what genre you're doing, on average, it's a rule of thumb for a reason. The 1 page equals 1 minute. It averages out. Not every page will equal that, but on average it does. So anyway, we did, 50-page script. I think I wrote it in Word. It wasn't even formatted correctly, but we did it. We finished the movie. We got it put out by York Entertainment at the time.
Okay.
Didn't
Tanya York. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. Didn't
Yes.
know it. Didn't know any better. And
A lot of people didn't.
so, but we had done our first movie and it was distributed. It was in
Mhm.
Blockbuster videos. It was in Hollywood videos and Walmarts and all of that stuff. So it was pretty cool. We didn't really make anything off of it, but we got it out.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then this was happening right around 2005, which at the end of 2005 was Hurricane Katrina.
Mhm.
And we were still in New Orleans. So after Katrina, I had been planning to move to Los Angeles, but the Katrina thing just kind of pushed it up.
Okay.
So we finished the movie, put the movie out, then Katrina happened, then I moved to Los Angeles. And when I got to Los Angeles, I was like, I really naively thought that it was going to be like, hey, welcome to Los Angeles, come direct our movies, and that I'd be able to get jobs directing movies, because I made this one,
Right.
and I could not get a job, like nothing. I couldn't get hired as a PA, like
Hmm.
anything. I was back working at Starbucks again, and I think I did that for about almost a year before I found my first assistant editing job. And then
Okay.
from that assistant editing job, I got pretty much, it just snowballed. Like every for hire job I got in
Mhm.
some way or shape or form came from that. And then I was, editing for other people. I did one of the people I was working for, I talked them into producing a feature for me called Edges of Darkness.
Mhm.
That did fairly well and caught the attention of some other filmmakers that started hiring me to direct and edit their movies. So that led off like the first quarter half of my career where I was just directing small features for other people. And in between, I think I produced maybe 3 or 4 on my own, and then just kept doing those works for hire. And somewhere in there, I was still doing freelance editing. So like I worked for Fox for a while. I've assistant edited on a couple of bigger documentaries. But yeah, that was the basic journey into filmmaking and making a somewhat of a living.
Yeah, I mean, and it certainly you have a really diverse, when you look at your IMDb, it's quite diverse on many levels. One, there's over 115 titles on there. And on the movie side,
Wow.
and ranging from horror, black church comedies, and now a lot of documentaries. Um, do you have a favorite genre? Do you have something that you prefer, or is it now just like the rest of your approach is kind of like, oh, it's what's in front of you or what's the opportunity is?
Yeah, I look at it. I'm pretty much. I look at my filmmaking taste as really similar to my viewership tastes, in
Hmm.
that I have. And everybody says like I like everything, but I really do like everything. Like I have a really broad range of tastes when it comes to movies, both as a fan and as a filmmaker. And on either side, I would get bored just doing one thing.
Hmm.
But that said, when it started out, I wanted to make horror movies. And I think my first 2 movies were horror movies, and then I did kind of a thriller, and then I started working for other people. And when I was first being hired, like the first set of movies that I was really hired to direct were
Hmm.
black run faith-based movies.
Right.
So, and I did, I don't know, probably half a dozen of those. And then that
Okay.
same company, because again, they didn't just stick to, Black Christian movies. They started, they were looking at the market. So, they moved into family films. They started doing comedies. At one point, we were doing thrillers. We did an erotic thriller. They did a couple of documentaries, which was my first taste in documentary filmmaking. And then, I was hired by another company that was basically trying to follow their business model, but for a little more money. And I was the technical director on 3 features they did. They were shooting them like sitcoms, like 3 camera shoots and on a stage. And I was just basically running the cameras, and the executive producer director, Jacarius Johnson, he was the quote unquote director of those. And then he hired me to do a movie called 40 to Life, which later the title was changed to The Sen Choice, which actually just came out on his streaming network. So like that movie's like, I don't know, 7 years old, but I think it's also the biggest budget thing I've ever directed. Like I believe the budget was around 250,000.
Well, no, that's a very sizable, that's a meaty budget there. Especially since you probably then your smaller ones, like you're under like what, your 5,000 to 10,000 ones. How many do you think there are of those?
You mean in budget range?
Yeah.
If you're not talking about documentaries, just narratives.
Yeah, just narrative.
Yeah, probably maybe 3 were that low. Maybe 4. The companies that were hiring me, their budgets were, I think the lowest one I ever did for those guys was the first one. I think it was around 25,000. But more regularly, they were between 40 and like 65 was where they were playing, except for that 250 one.
So then you were able to shoot usually were you doing more than 6 days of shooting, or was it more like 10 days, or how much would they actually give you to actually shoot?
Yeah, not very long. I would say on average they were 5-day shoots. I think the longest one I did with those guys was like 7 days. And then and there were a couple that were very short, like they did 2 one-day features and 1 2-day feature, where we shot the whole thing in 1 day, 2 days.
And they're spending their money on cast mainly.
Yeah,
in those types of circumstances. So it's
definitely.
Yeah, so it's just to how do you get them on the shelf? How do you get them moving? How do you get them to sell?
Right. And how do you have that name like throughout the movie? Because one really common thing with low budget movies is they'll get like a name actor. He'll come in for like 1 day or 2 days, and he'll be in the movie for like a total of 10 minutes or less sometimes. And with doing them in 1 or 2 days, you could get somebody and they could be in the entire movie, and a name talent, and they're only paying them for a day. I think that was the logic. And the thing about those movies too is, I won't go, I won't sit here and lie and say they were great movies, because they weren't, but they're better than you would think. Like you can do more than you think you can in a day. If you prep and you have the multiple cameras and you have the right location, I'm not ashamed of them. I'll say that.
Well, I think that's the most important part.
Right.
There's things that, I remember there was one production I worked on in Ohio, not to be named. And they called me up and they were mad because I had not been there really in editing as a producer. But the reality is they weren't paying me to be in editing. And they never listened to me on the set. And I was also turned down as to be the director of it. So he was like, well, you didn't do what you said you would do, so I'm going to reduce. I'm like, well, I'm more than happy for you to reduce my title. You can, matter of fact, take my name off of it. It's like, I really, certain ones you're just like, it's just fine if you're forgotten or you don't know, because half the time nobody's going to see those anyway. So especially through that experience of working on those films, for really kind of being a director, editor for hire, where did you really because it does seem more like ultimately these days you're really more choosing to be more of an editor producer type than someone who's directing as much. Is that more of a choice? Is it more just a business choice, or is it just you're being more selective about those things you're going to direct?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of all the above. For one, prior to 2 years ago, I had directed like around 20 narrative features, and all of them fairly low budget, and I was, I didn't want to direct any more movies that I wasn't like 100% passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a payday, or was just, hey, I just want to see if I can do this. Because a lot of those movies, like the one day features, for example. I mean, part of the excitement about doing those was, can I accomplish this? It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't so much like, oh, I love this script, I have to tell this story. It was more like, hey, can I pull this off?
Right.
And I didn't want to do that kind of thing anymore. Like, as a director, if I'm going to direct something, I want to be in love with it, and I want it to be more of a passion thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, I've been doing this low budget thing now for 10 years, and I was like, I can start helping others that are still passionate about doing directing low budget stuff, and maybe I can help produce for them, and
Yeah.
help create some opportunities for other people. And at the same time, the business, between, I think the last for hire movie I directed prior to this year was
Mm-hmm.
2014 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
And between then and like now, the distribution landscape just, it changed a lot. Like you, when I was doing those works for hire, you could make a movie for 50,000, throw a B or C level star in it, or shoot, sometimes even without, and make a pretty good profit. I mean, you could double or triple the budget sometimes, within the first year. And the people I were working for were regularly doing that. And I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is great. So then, in 2016, I decided, oh, I'm going to do this for myself. So, I had prepped a horror movie called DEATHDAY, which you were a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think our hard costs in that were around 55,000. And,
Mm-hmm.
it financially, it didn't work out. The movie didn't make money. And I fully believe if the movie had come out just like 2 years prior, it
Mm-hmm.
would have cleaned up, but it didn't. And it kind of knocked a little bit of the wind out of my sails, as far as, sinking in any more of my own money
Mm-hmm.
into, projects of that size narratively. And I had a guy, producer friend, telling me about, you should try documentaries. And I'd done a few for the other guys.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were basically just these like really chintzy, like talking head docs, like no B-roll, nothing. It was just straight talking heads.
Right.
And so I knew how easily, you could throw one together. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe I'll try it. And then as I got more and more into doing them, I really kind of fell in love with it. I don't necessarily want to direct them, but
Mm-hmm.
I like producing them, putting it together. And, as an editor, I mean, on a documentary, the editor, unless the director is really, strong involved in it,
Mm-hmm.
editing pretty much is directing on documentaries, to some extent,
Editors have a great influence on documentaries,
yeah,
and they can certainly, bigger documentaries get financed often based on the talent of the editor rather than the director. So, I mean, there is a lot of validity to that. And of course, when I'm directing, I'm much more of the strong-minded director. So we have more of a collaboration, I think, in that process, where in some cases you may be just making your decisions and getting to just decide what you're going to do, where in some cases someone's kind of saying, well, I think this, and what do you think? And that, I think, also, collaboration being a theme, is something that gets more out of projects ultimately.
right. Yeah, I agree with that.
So in that process, you're now, and then also you had some movies that you had made that you had gone back and you'd managed to get the rights for even before Death Day, or the movies that you had owned. So you had Trap. Uh, which movies did you actually own, and then are just that started you out really distributing, and having a
Yeah.
production company?
So yeah, Trap, the first movie, Rise of the Undead,
Mm-hmm.
Monsters in the Woods, those are more Edges of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the main four, that or three, four, yeah, that I had produced on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So those, and right around, I think I discovered Amazon, like the being able to go direct to Amazon. I think I discovered that in like 2015.
Okay.
And this was before it was called Prime Video Direct, and you had to submit through CreateSpace, which was basically a platform that was made for self-publishers or musicians to, self-publish their DVDs, CDs, or books. And then they opened it up to films to where you could create DVDs. And then I forget what year it was, but it was somewhere between 2010, 2015. Amazon opened up their streaming platform, and you could actually submit to it through CreateSpace. But the cool thing at this time was nobody knew about it. I mean, no, like I didn't know any other filmmakers that knew about it. So it felt like this little secret, but I was still at that point, being hired to direct other movies. I wasn't really looking at myself as an entrepreneur. And to be perfectly honest, especially in those, that first year or two, the movies weren't making anything. Like, $5 a month, maybe. And then, like out of nowhere, one of the titles, and I don't even remember which one now, popped up to $1,000 in a single month.
Was that Monsters in the Woods or Trap?
No,
The gorier one.
It was either Rise of the Undead. Or Edges of Darkness. I
Rise
honestly,
of Edges, maybe Edges of Darkness.
Yeah.
Which one do you try to read? Yeah, I think it's right. Maybe even Rise of the Undead.
I
remember.
Honestly, I think it was Edges, but I'm not 100%. But one of the two, it popped up, and it didn't stay up there. Like it was like $1,000 for a month, and I think it went down to like 200 or 300 the next month. But I kind of thought, hey, wait a minute, here's this like 10-year-old movie that just made $1,000 in a month on this little streaming platform that I can submit anything directly to. So like, if this was a new movie, what could it possibly do?
Right.
So it just opened my eyes. And so like I said, this was back in 2016, and I had just started working at an animation company called Gas Money Pictures, which, we had a angel investor, and it was an animation company, and it kind of took my attention away from filmmaking for about 2 years. So by the time 2018 rolled around, or 19, and I was done with Gas Money Pictures and getting back into making features again, then I kind of picked that train of thought back up. Like, okay, I'm going to make very low budget movies, new movies, and I'm going to put them out myself on like Amazon and find other platforms and work it like that. So that was the initial plan. And the production wise, the easiest thing to pull off was documentaries. So I started with documentaries, and then, within 6 months, I'd kind of fell in love with the documentary filmmaking. And that's what I've been doing for the past, almost 3 years now.
What was the first documentary?
I believe the first one was Rescue Me, A Home for Spot. It was a dog rescue documentary. And this actually, it's a decent story because it encompasses everything I like about the documentary filmmaking. So initially, this was totally just a pragmatic thing. I'm gonna do this documentary. I'm gonna shoot the interviews in a day or two. I'm gonna edit it in a week, and I'm gonna put it out and see what it does. And that was it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love dogs and all, but I had no real passion for shedding light on dog rescues or anything like that. But I had a friend who owned acquaintance who owned a dog rescue in Vegas. It was one of the biggest ones there, and she had a fairly interesting story. So I was like, hey, could I come down and do some interviews with you and the people that work for you? And she was like, yeah, sure. So I go down, and then something funny happened. Like, while I'm doing these interviews and listening to these people who are just like super passionate and just like they love what they're doing, and they're not making much money doing it. They're just trying to help dogs, and it's super sweet, and it's hard not to get caught up in that. So you're sitting there doing these interviews, and like, I'm freaking misty eyed, like interview after interview. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And then, I put it together, and I edited it very fast. I think I spent 5 or 6 days on it, and I put it out, and I had no idea what it was going to do. And I believe those first couple of months, it was earning like $1,000 a month, something like that. And then I was like, so it wasn't a thing where like, hey, I can make 1 or 2 documentaries a year and make a
Mhm.
living. But I'm like, man, if I can do these things in a couple of weeks, and even if they only make 1,000 a month or 500 a month, but over the course of the year, and say I have 12 of them, that's all of a sudden a thing, you know?
Well, yeah, and so then I think that you're making them yourself. But then you're starting to look for people to branch out to. So,
Yeah.
there's Jeremy, of course, who's probably the most prolific uh, of the people you've reached out with. There's me, who's probably the second, but I'm like really slow. And then there's been a couple other individuals with individual one up, or the gentleman JP over in England.
And yeah,
Uh,
yeah, because so I realized that I could do it myself, and I still continue to do a few on my own, but
mhm,
pretty early on, it became obvious that the the hardest thing to put together with documentary filmmaking, it is organizing the interviews, finding the interviewees, booking them, preparing the interviews, doing the interviews. That was the thing that was taking up the most time. And
mhm.
even though you're typically not paying the interviewees, but you're still, sometimes there's travel involved. Either you to them or them to you. There's the time, getting out to shoot the B-roll. And I started realizing that, man, like the time in there, if I'm doing every single one, is going to take up too much of my time to make it financially viable. So I was like, I'm going to start taking on partners that can take on some of the production parts. So, like I have a partner like Jeremy Nori in California, and I was in LA at the time. But anyway, we'll brainstorm a topic, and then he'll go out, he'll book all of the interviews, he'll perform all of the interviews, he'll shoot all the interviews, basically taking the production part of it just totally off my plate. And then I'll do the post production and the distribution, and we work our back end from there.
Right, or it's, something like I brought you, I believe I said, "Hey, I wanna do rhymecology."
Yeah, yeah, and
Uh,
and
you
and
know?
you brought the project, like that was like, in that case, that was totally your project that
Mhm.
you brought to me, and then, and you booked the interviews, you performed most of the interviews. I think I did a few, but
You did a couple shoots because I was working on Central Ave, I think, at the time, so
right,
you
right.
you covered a couple of things like
But yeah, and
Sekou and
there's different things with different collaborators,
mhm.
for example, like like working with you, we've done much fewer projects. We take longer making the projects. We're working a little more to up the quality of the projects, and hopefully break into a new plateau of or a new level of distribution,
Right.
because the thing is, and I'll be straight honest, so I had a good, like, 2019, 2020, but 2021, which is really, so the Amazon stopped taking documentaries in, I think it was February of 2020, but
Mhm.
it didn't really start hurting till about 6 or 7 months after that, because you still had all the stuff that you had just put up that was still earning, because with low budget, I mean, probably pretty much with any movies, your first like 90 days, your first 6 months is where you're going to make the bulk of the revenue of the lifetime of the movie for a lot of times.
Mhm.
So that first 6 months after they stopped taking docs, it didn't really hurt, because we had just put out new ones, and it was all, it was all cool, and we had other platforms that were going. But now, between then and now, I haven't been able to put, I think I've slipped in maybe 2 or 3 documentaries onto Amazon or IMDb TV since that no documentary thing, but for the
Mhm.
most part, none of them. And when you look at the revenue differentials, prior to that purge, I would say in 2021, the exhibition income saw a 40 to 50% drop just from the Amazon thing. I mean, yeah, I started getting more stuff on Tubi, and like they were seeing more money on Tubi. And in general, indie films are making more on Tubi. But when it comes to documentaries, and nobody will convince me different, they make more on Amazon, even at that 1 cent an hour. So, and I'd been trying to put on a positive face about it over the last 6 to 7 months, but I'm just prepping a video, like an end of the year retrospective on everything that was produced in 2021 and what it earned. And honestly, I was kind of like gobsmacked at like how little, because I wasn't thinking about it overall, because you still see monthly revenue from movies that are 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, which can make up a good chunk of revenue. And but then like the new ones, which typically are supposed to be making the most, this year have made the least. So my overall take home, like in 2020, would have been like 60% new films, 40% old films, but in 2021 it was like 10% new films, maybe less, and then 90%, maybe more, on older films. So the Amazon thing, it's pretty, it's hurt.
Well, the gap hasn't closed yet. I think there's
Yeah.
also been some discoveries from our side, from like being on, Roku is now more open to taking more things, and we haven't seen exactly how much they're going to be paying. So there's been some things that have opened up that were closed before, that I think, and that will be able to see more closure in that gap. And then also just having to look more at narrative films, ultimately, uh, giving at least on the smaller levels, and then trying to raise ultimately the bigger ones. So what
Yeah.
are your kind of plans as you look at, knowing that, moving into 2022, as we're basically in the last quarter here, because we've just seen the third quarter.
Yeah.
So we know what it's going to look like. We know what's going to basically look like for the fourth quarter, just based off the
Totally.
third.
Yeah.
So then how do you make changes for, quarter one of 2022?
So I'm looking at 2022 kind of in a whole new way. It's going to be a paradigm shift. I've talked a lot on this channel about quick release, like high volume strategy, and
Mm-hmm.
honestly, in 2019, 2020, that was working pretty good. And if that uptick had continued, it could have been awesome. Like, I think, had Amazon stayed with documentaries and not cut everything to a penny an hour, and we'd still kept diversifying income streams so that
Mm-hmm.
it can go up. I fully believe by like 2024, if that would have held, you would have been looking at, it could have been into the millions. Like, I fully believe it would have been a great model, but alas, that is not to be. So in 2022, as far as documentaries go, I'm not going to stop making them, but my plan is now I'm not going to do any more like super quick ones anymore. Like, there's a base level of quality that I want to put out from here out, and I want the movies, because, to be honest, almost everything that I put out to this point, it really couldn't be anywhere else besides Tubi, besides like the Roku channels, besides, Vimeo on demand, besides the places that you can basically get to on your own or through, someplace like Film Hub.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to make movies that at a minimum I can give to larger distributors, or make direct deals with larger platforms, like where you can get some of those, Hulu deals or Netflix deals or whatever, like that have more legs than, ten or $20,000 in the year on Amazon.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly, as we've started to work with other people's titles, not just, mine or, yours, but, other filmmakers, you're seeing what old titles in certain specific genres can make, 20 years later, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I'm repping a film for a filmmaker, which I can't really name,
Mhm,
but it's an old film. It was shot, I want to say 2014, maybe 15.
mhm,
The old movie, budget well under $10,000, and it made like 17,000 in 1 month on Tubi. It didn't hold that. I think it did like 17,000, then 10,000, then like 7,000, and
mhm.
I think it's around 5,000 this month. But still, this is an old movie that costs less than $10,000, that has earned over $50,000 in 4 or 5 months. So like that kind of opened my eyes back up to maybe getting back into more narrative stuff. Like I said, I don't want to leave the documentaries behind, but I've kind of, I mean, I haven't made a narrative movie since Death Day, so which I believe we shot in 2018 or 17.
I think so. Yeah. So I
Yeah,
haven't.
yeah, at least 3 years. So I'm filling the itch, and I don't necessarily need to jump in and direct everything,
Mhm.
but I definitely feel the need to get back into them, and I do want to get back into directing them
Well, absolutely. And
eventually.
I think that you should. I mean, just even the experience you have, it's doing it. But let's take a look at. So let's say you're going to be stuck on a desert island,
Hmm.
and you can take one film, and I can say film series, or you can take a TV series. What do you take?
Okay, TV series, I would, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say it now because he's had such a bad go of it the last couple of years. Turned out to be
Mhm.
a major asshole, but I loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That was probably my overall favorite show. That's probably what I would take.
Okay, so you're taking Buffy.
Yeah,
He's taking Buffy.
I think of
So,
Buffy.
now I'm taking a different turn here. So we kind of talked about it, but let's get into it a little bit more since we're on your channel and we're talking live here because you started this channel.
Yeah,
Why the Jay Horton channel? Why start a YouTube? We're making all these documentaries. We're distributing it all directly, and in the midst of that, kind of like in the midst of that, I decided to start a streaming network. You decided to start a YouTube channel.
yeah.
So what makes you do that?
Man, that's a really good question. And my stock answer had been, I was trying to think of another way to help drive traffic to some of my movies and basically that. But if I was going to be 100% honest, I
Mhm.
think somewhere in the back of my head, and it wasn't a conscious thing, but somewhere in the back of my head, that old, like, from grade school, from high school, from early college, like, wanting attention, wanting to be,
Oh, you rock star, you.
yeah, I don't want to say
You went and
rocks.
bought a
Yeah,
guitar and
I
everything.
did buy a guitar. Yeah, that's right. It's right there. But yeah, there's like some part of it was like I had kind of lost my desire, my need for
Mhm.
validation for my movies. Like if I direct a movie and put it out, like, I don't need to see, oh, Jason Horton did this great job. It doesn't really, or bad job, whichever it may be. But that doesn't really affect me one way or the other anymore. But like something about this, because like this is direct. This is me. And so when somebody says something nice to me about this channel, it means so much more to me than if they said something nice about Monsters in the Woods, or Edges of Darkness. And then on the other level, and this is true, this isn't just me, trying to virtue signal, but I worked in the independent film industry for 20 years now. And and I've worked at, has a director, has a writer, has a producer. I've put these movies out. Like I have experience that I feel is valuable, and I know stuff now that, God, I wish I would have known when I was starting out, or even in year 5. So like I feel like I can share that knowledge to other filmmakers and maybe help them decrease the amount of time that it took me to get to where I could make a living, you know?
Well, I have to say that working with you, on a daily basis, that I learn things about production every day because we're always kind of charting new territory and finding new ways to do things and think about them. And that's one of the funnest things, a part of it, because we're challenging those ideas and always kind of think, okay, well, what else can we do, or how else can we do it? It's not about getting something and sitting on it. We're always trying to grow and see how we have to swim or sink or swim ultimately. So, what have you learned from YouTube that is different from the other platforms and other forms of filmmaking that you've explored?
So, man, I would recommend to almost any filmmaker to get involved in like YouTube or something like YouTube in some way, shape, or form, because I have learned more about like the business side, the marketing side of filmmaking, and it is applicable. You know, like the YouTube marketing is definitely applicable to movie marketing, and it's I've learned so much about it. And there's like these YouTube like growth experts, and a lot of them are full of shit, but there's good ones. There's really good ones out there, and they have great marketing knowledge. And once I started kind of getting serious about the channel and watching some of this stuff, I mean, I use those techniques when I for my movies, for everything, even creatively, because they talk a lot about audience retention and starting out strong and keeping people watching, and all of that comes down to really one pretty simple golden rule, and that's giving the audience something that they need and want. And then not only marketing that you're going to give them this thing, but then actually delivering that thing, not a bastardization of that thing, or not a bait and switch. And once you start taking those things to heart, it's like, sky's the limit.
Awesome. That's an excellent answer too. So, I think that you've answered this, but I'm gonna go from this is my what we call the 5 questions as we wrap this up with you. What's the snack that you have to have on the catering table?
Mm. Okay, so when I first started out, it would have been donuts.
Hmm.
But now it sounds super cheesy and boring, but it's vegetables. Like the those really, and they can be cheap, like those carrot, like broccoli,
Hmm.
cauliflower plates. I
Do you
I will
like some dressing too? Do you need some
no,
dressing?
no, no, no. I
No,
eat them
no
dry,
dressing.
just dry, and I'll literally snack on that all day long.
So he
That's I
just
like
get
that.
some dry broccoli for the.
I mean,
He
you could.
wants dry broccoli. Let me have a head of dry broccoli and some sour old carrots, please. Okay.
Dude, you can pick that shit up from Ralph's for like 6.99. I'm happy.
All right. Okay. So what is your he's happy with that. What is your guilty pleasure film or TV series that no one would ever suspect?
Mm. Wow, that's a good one. Uh, Gosh, that nobody would suspect. What do I like? Oh, okay. Skins. The UK teeny bopper show.
Mhm.
That was like I was already way too old to be watching it when it was first out, and I'm still way too old to be watching it. But I would totally like binge the hell out of that movie or show.
Okay.
I really like Skins.
So he really likes Skins. Okay. Name the movie that makes you cry every time.
I mean, actually, for me, the better question would be name a movie that doesn't make you cry. Because like
Mhm.
I've got it's as I've gotten older, I get super emotional about almost anything. I was watching a freaking commercial the other day, and it was a funny commercial. It was just a it was it's like on Hulu, and it's like a husband and
Mhm.
wife, and he's all high because he just come out of the dentist, and it's super short, and he just says something like the spaceman said that I was going to get ice cream, and she's like, "Oh, ice cream," and that's all there is to it. There's like nothing to it, but there was something really sweet about the way they were interacting. I was like, okay, I was creating this whole backstory for him and everything in my head in this 15-second commercial, and I'm bawling. So yeah, anyway, pretty much anything will make me cry.
Okay. Name the movie that makes you laugh.
Um, I wish I could think of a new comedy in the last like 10 years that's really made me laugh, but I couldn't. But you know what? I just watched Only Murders in the Building on Hulu, the
Mhm.
Steve Martin, Martin Short, Selena Gomez show. And there's a couple of moments in that where I think I laughed harder than I have in years. I highly recommend that show if people haven't seen it yet. It's a great show.
All right. And so what's your favorite part of being a filmmaker?
So I'm sure this has been said before, but yeah, my to me the coolest thing about doing anything in the arts, if it's something you love, is like doing something, being paid to do something you love is like there's nothing better than that. And I'm not as passionate as I was, in my 20s or 30s, but I still love it, and it still doesn't often feel like work. So I think that's pretty valuable.
So what do you have coming up and you are going to be a regular guest once a month on the Weekly Read because
Mm.
it's on your channel. And we'll always make sure we talk about what's coming up on the channel. and what you're working on. So, what can we look forward to this week and next week on the Jay Horton YouTube channel?
What is coming up this week? Oh, on on Wednesday, I have a new video coming out about what it's like, what it takes to be a good independent producer.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an interview with you that drops on Sunday, and then I have a video on Film Hub the Wednesday after, a couple of Film Hub videos, and a couple more micro budget Marauders, and then I have interviews every Sunday, still set up for like November and December.
So most exciting is the interview with me that's dropping this Sunday.
Yeah,
That's the most important thing that we
that's
should
about
emphasizing is me and
yeah.
Sean talking to me as I got to. So we broke in front of. So my introduction became me interviewing you, but ultimately we were planning on my show dropping and then
And then doing this.
doing this, but somehow it worked out that I got pushed twice for other people. And you can see
I had people running Indiegogo campaigns that really wanted their stuff up.
I understand. I'm just saying it still wasn't me.
Yeah, I know.
It wasn't me.
It was not. It was not. And
So if it's not me, it's not that important.
Yeah. but my overall plan is like I'm going to continue to do my regular content on YouTube. I'm going to continue to do, a video just me every Wednesday, and I'm going to continue to do interviews, which will be on the Sundays. But I would like to grow the channel outside of me. So, I want to seek out other filmmakers like yourself to do stuff like this. And we're talking, today you're talking to me, but other days you're going to be talking to people that, are outside of, my reach, or, even sometimes my area of interest. And it's just nice to, expand that, that base. And I think people will respond well.
Well, I hope so, and I really appreciate the time, and hopefully we make it worthwhile for everybody. So, thank you, Jay, so much. I'm looking forward to talking to you every month here on the Weekly Read, and this is the Weekly Read, and the Weekly Read this week is Netflix and Dave Chappelle controversy. It's put a light on Netflix and the president, Ted Sardonis, and is raising a very interesting question for all of us that have streaming services. It makes us realize it's not exactly CBS or Paramount that have years of bureaucracy and CYA in mind to mainly avoid situations like this type of controversy. But on the positive side, it's great to see a company like Netflix give voice to employees of all backgrounds, and most importantly, start a conversation that maybe we wouldn't have had. And isn't that what's the most important to any form of good art, good stand-up, good films, good poetry, good books, good art? What about the Danish artist who supplied a canvas that was blank and took $1 million for it? It certainly takes a conversation, and it takes a move by an individual to actually get that conversation going. As an artist, I applaud Dave Chappelle for going down a road that he knew was going to ultimately put gas on the fire of an issue. And he ultimately did do that. But it's key for us to actually keep the conversation going. So in that idea, I'm always here for that on the Weekly Read. And I don't know what that message was that was flashing. Dude, what? Dude, where's my car? And dude, did we lose Jason?
No, sorry. That was a technical error. Sorry.
That was a technical glitch. And hopefully in coming weeks, we'll actually have questions from individuals in the audience. And we'll get to find out, what you think and what those different types are. And certainly hit me up on IG. I believe it's Sean Alden Reid at Gmail. And in the future, we'll be all right. Sean Alden Reid at Gmail is my personal email. Hit me up at newcinematribe@gmail.com. You can find out more at newcinematribe.com. You can also go to World One TV, which is my new streaming network, which we'll be talking more about, and even doing some interviews with people like Brian White, who's a long-term collaborator of mine. And some new collaborators, and fortunately, a lot of the Zapruder Flicks material and New Cinema Tribe material is, of course, on World One TV. So next week I'm going to be talking to a gentleman I met here because, as you know, I'm down here in the Atlanta area. Moved down to South. We're in Fayetteville, and he has a YouTube channel called Mixed Nuts. And I will be talking to Marcus about how he has gotten into the YouTube channel and started his own channel. So he'll be a media maker. He's extremely funny, and he will actually turn out to be a regular on us. Where sometimes when we're interviewing Jason, we'll um, interview Marcus. So that will be one of the things that we're doing. So I see I've went longer than I wanted to on my wrap up. I should have kept Jason on talking longer, but we've got some stuff in terms of following us. Obviously, you can follow me on Twitter at Sean A. Reid. And you can also check us out, of course, on this channel. So new stuff dropping this Sunday. You can actually check Saturday, right, Jason? Saturday I drop, or Sunday?
Sunday.
Okay, so Sunday you'll get to see the opposite side of this conversation on this channel, where Jason interviews me. And you'll get to find out more about my background and some of my stuff at E, and why I do things, and why one of my themes is you need to feed everybody on set. And in this show, we will be talking more about those types of things, kind of what's going on in media in terms of controversy, and also what those things, I think, from artists, what our responsibilities are, whether we're independent or we're going on big. And we'll try to hold everyone accountable for one, our own approach, what we're doing, and what we're doing as artists. We're all members of a community. Hopefully we're helping each other and sharing information. That's what I really love about the J. Horton. Why I've been checking it out and participating in different types of ways. So I'm really honored and privileged to be on it, and certainly glad to have Jason here supporting it. So this is what happens when people are stretching. They're stretching. They're putting in air. But make sure that you get with us next Friday. And thank you for being with us this Friday, because we really enjoyed it here on the Weekly Read. So that is, I think, almost it for me. And we've got a couple more minutes here, but